firstly, I know what chaos looks like, right? So I've been in some dark places in my life. I know what darkness looks like. I'm not afraid to go there, and I'm not afraid to go there with somebody else, and in their own darkness.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Chris Nichols. Today, my guest is Eric Uresk, who is a championship mindset coach, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and an MMA coach. His mission is to help professional men create clarity out of chaos. Eric and I had an incredible conversation. This is probably one of my favorite podcasts to date, just because of how wild his life experience was and the evolution and transformation that he went through. He was involved in all kinds of crazy activities as a kid, from street fights to substance abuse. He really opens up about these traumatic experiences. He ended up in rehab and in and out of psych wards and, of course, broken relationships. But then he was able to transform out of that. He got sober. He then started his career in professional fighting and bouncing at high-end events and clubs. And then he got into his coaching journey from MMA. He was in Thailand for a bit. And now he is helping people to get out of this chaos that he knows all too well from his life experience. So I love this conversation, and I think you guys will get some great value out of it too. And now just a quick mention of each sponsor for this episode. This episode is sponsored by Jungle Athletico. It's my favorite jiu-jitsu supply and apparel brand. Its founder, Alex Taylor, was featured on the Nichols and Dime show. You can use my link in the description to get 15% off your order when you use the code Nichols and Dimes with a Z at checkout. We also have Truve, which is a plant-based energy tea, whose founder, Max Holdreth, was also featured on the Nichols and Dime show. You can also use my link in the description for 50% off your first order if you use the code Nichols and Dimes with a Z at checkout. Next, we have Guy Fawkes, a luxury cologne and candles company. You can use the code DIMEZ, Dimes, at checkout for 10% off whatever you get. And now for the conversation with Eric Uresk. Enjoy. Eric, man, what's going on?
Just kicking it, man. Just enjoying the afternoon, and just happy to take a little time, come over here, catch up with you.
Man, dude, I appreciate you coming on over, and it's been good to get connected with you through all of our mutual friends, and
absolutely,
through Victory MMA and whatnot. It's a pretty awesome community that becomes pretty small pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but man, dude, what a unreal story you've got. I'm excited to dig into it. You're going to tell us all about it, but you've had a wild upbringing from your younger years and your MMA career, and then what you're doing now to help other people with coaching and everything else, and your podcast. We're going to touch on all that stuff. But I would like to just dive into it with something that you have written on your Instagram profile.
Sure.
You say that you help professional men create clarity out of chaos.
Yeah.
How do you do this?
So, well, firstly, I know what chaos looks like, right? So having a familiarity with chaos, I think definitely supports me. I've been in some dark places in my life, early in my life, later in my life. I know what darkness looks like. I'm not afraid to go there, and I'm not afraid to go there with somebody else, and in their own darkness. So I've always had an innate gift as a mixed martial arts coach and just observing life in general, the ability to see how things mix together, right? So mixed martial arts, I'm pulling from all different disciplines, right? Mm-hmm. And, you have striking coaches, you have wrestling coaches, jiu-jitsu coaches. One thing I always did really well is I understood the interwoven aspects of all of those things when they come together, which is an intangible that a person may not understand if they come from one discipline.
Yeah. And
you could say, if we were to look at like the 4 quadrants of somebody's life, right? Mm-hmm. So their mind, their body, their relationships, and their work. Okay. I don't believe that those things are separate. In fact, I believe they're inextricably linked and that they all touch each other in one facet or another, right? And so my gift is the ability to see where certain things may be out of balance and then help and support an individual into creating that balance, towards whatever particular goals or outcomes they're looking to create for themselves.
Right. I love the way you link that idea of MMA, pulling from all the different facets of MMA, right? And comparing that to a life or applying that rather to a life situation. That's like, could you describe maybe what that looks like in a life example compared to saying in MMA, we're pulling from jiu-jitsu, we're pulling from striking, kickboxing, all those things.
Sure. Okay. So let's say you're a guy and you're successful and you own a business, or maybe you don't own a business. Maybe you just have a position that affords you a really nice salary.
Sure.
And you feel a certain amount of stress that has you over focused on work. And that over focus on work has led you to some degree to have some neglect to your children and your wife. Okay. Because you've always prioritized on success in this one area, maybe you have not developed the skills to be able to deal with personal hardships or just relationship skills in general when it comes to the home, right? Maybe you're fantastic at schmoozing customers and doing that whole thing, or the people that you deal with in a corporate structure. But when it comes to dealing with the hard stuff at home, maybe you haven't developed those skills, those aptitudes. Maybe you don't have the best role models for what that looks like. So now you have an over prioritization on work, and there's stress in the home because of your lack of presence. Okay, we'll say. And you feel that stress, and you feel to some degree that you are maybe failing as a father and failing as a husband. That stress compounds the stress that you feel at work, right? And maybe I don't want to feel the fact that I'm not doing the job I think I should be doing as a husband and as a father. And so I have all these other avoidant patterns that I engage in: gambling, porn, sex. Maybe I cheat on my wife. Maybe, could look a bunch of different ways, right? Drugs, alcohol, just getting lost in your phone, whatever, right? And so if we were to only look at one of those areas, we'd be missing a lot, right? If we just start to take a look at the family, we're not looking at, well, what is the thought processes and the beliefs that are creating your over prioritization of work to begin with, right? If we were to take this gentleman to the end of his life and show him the grand total of his life and ask him, hey, if you had to change something, would you have worked harder? Would you have spent more time focused on work and making money and chasing the success rabbit or not?
Right.
Now, I'm sure most of us listening have heard some sort of anecdote or if not personal experience of people on their way out. And usually the consensus is they would have focused on the small things, right? The things that matter. But the things that when we live in a survival or scarcity mindset, those are the first things we throw in the back seat.
Yeah. Well said. And that brings me right into, how did you become familiar with chaos? And I'm sure another way to ask that is, what was your childhood like?
Okay. So yeah, I grew up in Long Island, New York, right? So I'll be 43 in a couple of weeks. So I was born in 1981. So my childhood was basically 80s and 90s, and cool time to grow up for sure. The home that I lived in, I had two parents that were not equipped to be in relationship, right? My father was and is an alcoholic. My mother, just extremely codependent, all her brothers are in really bad shape from drugs and alcohol. In fact, two of them are dead. And just substance abuse just ran rampant in my family. Every male on both sides of my family have a substance abuse issue, right, of some sort, or had a substance abuse issue of some sort. So the odds weren't great for me, and I don't think it's a genetically hereditary thing. I just think the emotional displacement was put in place. So it's like I got involved in substance abuse real early. And
how early?
13, I want to say. I was in bad shape by like 14.
Were you introduced to it because of the influence from your parents, or did you kind of find it on your own?
My cousin. My cousin. Okay. And I'll get to that in a moment. So my house was not a safe place. My dad was emotionally and physically abusive, right? My mother catastrophized everything. Okay. So I couldn't go to my parents with anything and feel like I was going to be safely guided into some lesson about anything, a mistake or anything. Everything was catastrophized. Everything was the worst thing that could have happened. And it was terrifying to make a mistake with my parents. So I spent as little time around them as possible. Right.
So you're away from home as much
out on my bike as much as possible.
Wow.
Right. Early in my life, I just got this programming in my head that the only way to be safe and loved as a man is to do, well, the only men I knew that were safe and loved, well, I didn't know anybody, but I watched a lot of 80s action movies, right? And so what do you learn in an 80s action film? You see these guys and they incur some kind of trouble, okay? And they go on essentially some sort of hero's journey. They face this adversity. They're all violent, right? And they kick the enemy's ass and they get the girl at the end and everybody loves them, and that's the hero. And so in my 5-6-year-old brain at the time, I'm like, boom, that's it. So I had a couple of bullying incidences real young, and it wasn't the physical violence itself that really bothered me. It was the lack of control that I felt. It was a similar lack of control that I felt in my own home. Right. Wow. So I don't mind sharing this, but when I was really young, I would sit and my father would get up very early for work. And sometimes he would just go on these tirades on my mother. And like, I don't know if it got physical or not, but I would often hear her crying in the other room. And I remember just like wanting to hide under my covers and like wanting to protect my mother, but also feeling kind of helpless and like hoping that he wasn't going to come for me next. Right. And this would be at like 5-6 in the morning. Right. I got to go to school.
And but it was like, physical.
I don't know if it was physical with them or not. Okay. He didn't beat us all the time, right? I wish that he would have. It was the emotional threat. It was the imminent threat. He was verbally very scary. His emotions were. I always say this: like a reactive man is a weak man. My father, when I was a kid, was a weak man. He couldn't maintain his emotions, and. He had a lot of other strengths, but in that capacity, when a man is emotionally reactive, he takes the safety away from everybody around him. Right.
Could you share what his strengths were?
He's a super hardworking guy. So he worked 7 days a week for probably the first 30 years of my life.
Wow.
Like 3 different jobs. He did what he thought he had to do to provide. Right.
I see.
Yeah.
That helps. Yeah, because I think a lot of people can quickly breeze over, oh yeah, I had an abusive parent, and then they're put in a box, right, for the listener. So I like to just get the full picture.
Yeah. And he just didn't have any communication skills at all. I don't know what, he was in the military young, he was a Marine, and I don't know where that got shut off in him. He was actually a pretty well-liked guy when he was younger, and even still he's quite quirky, but he just had some demons, and no one really knows what they are, and he's never been really open to share about them. But it just made for a play. I didn't want to be anywhere around there. Yeah. And so I got this idea, okay, this is what a man looks like. It also kind of helped me deal with the own helplessness I felt in my own home, right? So what did I start doing? I just started going out into the neighborhood and starting fights.
Just so you could feel a sense of control.
Yeah, I had a really early penchant for violence, and it was not hard for me to be violent and hit other kids and make them cry and sometimes break bones. And as a little kid, 9, 10 years old, 11 years old. And it felt really good. It felt like a sense of control. If there was older kids around, they would applaud me, and I would create a certain reputation, a certain character for myself. And I was like, oh, this is it. And then I had to move 6th grade going into 7th grade. So 6th grade going into 7th grade, that's when in New York we would go into junior high.
Right.
So I just spent all this time creating this character. Now I had to start over again.
Wow.
Right. I was not well liked by the popular group of kids in that new school. So I ended up hanging out. I spent a lot of time with some other older kids around the neighborhood. Really, they just kind of tolerated me hanging around. I had a cool group of older guys and girls in the neighborhood, and some of them were involved in some criminal activity. And I just idolized these guys. Like they just didn't seem scared of anything. right? And girls liked them, and everybody in the neighborhood would stop and be like, "Oh, that's so and so," and I just thought that was so cool. And you know, in my young mind, I'm like, man, I just want to be like that. You know, when you know, when the drug dealers would pull up, I'd be like, those guys, no, they're not scared of anything, and everybody's scared of them. I want to be just like that. And so I was clocking that all the time, just kind of writing down mental notes and you know, figuring out the character that I wanted to create now, because I didn't have it going for me when I first got there. And so it took me a couple of years to get it going. But once I got it going and I saw it start to do what I wanted it to do, I ran with it full blast.
So how did you get connected with that group of people? Did you approach them, or did they recognize you being the way you were and they accepted you because of that?
So I had a friend, my friend Tracy, shout out to Tracy. And she had an older brother named Greg. Greg was a huge mentor to me. He was about 4 years older than me at the time. Greg put up with me. He would laugh at us. He would kind of haze me and some of my other young friends. And Greg would kind of listen to our stories. And we were just, you know, we thought we were cool because we were drinking and smoking weed. And they would just kind of laugh at us, him and this guy, John Brown. John Brown was like this gangster dude in the neighborhood. It was like stories of him beating up his stepdad at like 15 and just involved in a lot of crime, like a real tough guy. Yeah. All right. And cool, smart brother, real well thought out, rapped, and just like, you know, this is early 90s, mid 90s. So John Brown was God to me. He was like there's no one higher than that. And they barely knew he existed at this time. Right. But then when Greg had graduated high school, he had gone down to Miami for a bit. Him and John went down to Miami. While they were gone, I was probably about 14 or 15 by this time. And I started making a name for myself from fighting in the neighborhoods and beating people up and robbing drug dealers and just kind of doing my thing. When they came back, they kind of heard what I was up to, and they kind of took me in, and they would let me hang out with them. I would, you know, they would give me work to move around. And it was just became that kind of relationship. Like John became a mentor in a certain respect, and Greg became a mentor. Greg would always keep me around. Greg would kind of have me around to handle things. Cause by the time I was like 15, I was beating up grown men. And so I felt like I had a superpower, and I exploited it at every opportunity that I could.
Wow. Okay. So that confidence alone that you built up within you just gave you this insane sense of energy. I feel like, to be able to do that. It's scary to get into any fight. It's just, and then you talk about beating up drug dealers. That's a whole nother level. Yeah. Right. And then we could talk about what it's like today versus, you know, then where, you know, everyone's got a gun on them, but that's a different conversation. Yeah. I mean, but either way, it's scary as hell. Sure. You obviously had this base of confidence to believe in yourself to go beat up some guy, right? And get what you wanted out of it. But could you talk about any sort of fear that came with it, or if there really was any at all?
So it was really strange. Once I had evidence, really it was like you could blame high school wrestling. Like I started wrestling and I just took to it really fast, and I had a natural talent for it right away. And I was like, oh man, like, and I started using it in fights, just picking people up and slamming them on the pavement. And the evidence that was coming back to me was I didn't need to be scared of nothing. And then there was a few fights that I had got into with people that were supposed to be really tough in the neighborhood. You know, like, I don't know if neighborhoods exist the way they do, or if this stuff still exists. But it's like, there was like these like neighborhood, like legends, these tough guys. They were like almost like folklore, you know? Yeah. And once I beat a couple of them up, like I was my own folklore now. Right. And so I just bought into my own hype, and I wasn't afraid of anything. In fact, I remember one time I was maybe 16, 17, and I robbed a guy that was in his early 20s, probably 23, 24. I think I took him for like an ounce of coke, like, and he came pulling up to where I was hanging out, actually at Greg's house, and he pulled up with another guy that actually ended up working for me later, and threatening to shoot me unless I gave it back. And I remember walking towards the car, daring him to pull the trigger. And I really did not think, I really thought I was invincible. Like, it was not like I think it was some sort of, it was really delusional thinking, right? But I really thought I was invincible. And I kept walking to the car, getting closer, and I pulled his bluff, and he just took off.
Wow.
You know?
That answers that question really well.
Yeah. So that, I felt like that until, fast forward, 18 or 19, I go to these guys' house, and these guys are real bad guys. These guys are like criminals, that lifelong criminals. One of them was like 20 something years old, early 20s. The other guy was older. He was like 40. And these guys were just like, bad seeds, right? No light in their life left at all. They give me some money to get them something, right? And I could always middleman things. And so I just took my boys out for a night. We went out drinking and spent their money. I go back to these guys' house the next night. They're having a party. And I'm like, yeah, don't worry. The guy will be here later with the stuff. Everything's cool. I start drinking. I'm at a phase in my life when I'm this young. I got this real power over victimizing people. And so I start to just destroy their house while they're having this house party. I'll leave out the gross details. But yeah, basically just pissing on anything I thought would be funny, diving through the sheetrock of their walls, pulling ceiling fans down, setting things on fire. I call the entire party into the living room, and I point at these guys and laugh at them and told them I spent their money last night. They're not getting anything in front of a room full of people.
Ooh, boy.
Everybody's just dead quiet and kind of awkward. I think this is the height of humor.
Wow.
At the time. Like, I'm doing this. It was like an Andy Kaufman skit. Like, I was doing this to amuse me. I don't think anybody else was amused. You know, my friends had seen me do this a million times, but they were like, I think we should get out of here. And I refused to leave until I passed out on their couch, blacked out. Wow. So they come in while I'm blacked out and go to work on me with a pair of Louisvilles. Oof. And it was bad. I was pretty fucked up by it. Like, took a couple of bad shots to the face. You could still see there's the scar on my lip.
Oh, wow.
This was hanging off my face. And teeth were shattered. It was a mess. And, you know, I managed to wrestle my way to the street, and a car came driving down the road. I jumped on the hood and got driven home to safety.
Wow.
And that's where I lost my invincibility. I knew I wasn't invincible anymore after that happened.
And when exactly was this again?
18, 19.
Okay. Wow. All right. So I was just going to ask you, with this lifestyle you were a part of, how did you get through high school? I graduated. So from 17, I started getting sent to group homes and rehabs, and I was in all types of psych wards and mental institutions, and had a really rough time of it. They diagnosed me with all sorts of mental illness and had me loaded up on medication, but I would escape these places. I just kept escaping and escaping until I finally got court mandated. I had robbed some drug dealers. Like I set up a drug deal, and these guys showed up, and I robbed them. I put a knife to the guy's throat in a dumpster, and took their money, took off. They went to the cops. So I went on the run for a little bit, got picked up. I had already probably been to these long-term care facilities a couple times before this. Yeah.
Now I was court mandated to go. Okay. It's like, all right, it's either this or prison. So I don't want to go to prison, because that would have been probably like 7 years. I think I was looking at, maybe even longer.
How long?
I think like 7 years I was looking at. Wow. They knocked the charge down because it was an armed robbery, but it was an armed robbery to people that were intending to sell drugs. I think somewhere in there it got knocked down, and I fucking had an angel on my shoulder somewhere. I still have no idea how this all worked out for me, because even while I was going to court for that, I got picked up for an assault charge in the middle of that. I beat some kid up badly, like fractured his skull and nearly killed him. Thank God he, it wasn't permanent, but so I'm doing all this wild shit, and now I got to go back to this place. So I go back to this place again, but I would take these hiatuses, and I would leave, and it was just a mess, dude. And my life is not going anywhere good, you know? So I'm in and out of these homes on these. Yeah, I think that's the one that, because of that crime, I had to go and actually finish. So I spent the better part of 17 to 20 in these type of places. There were like what they call MICA units. So they were like half a rehab behavioral therapy model, and also like a what they call the MICA unit, which was a medically ill chemical abuser. Right. So I'm in there with some
really fucked up people.
Really, really people in a bad spot for sure. And yeah, I think I finally got out of those places when I was like 20. And then it still took me another 3 years to get sober.
Well, so how involved were your parents during that time period, 17 to 20? When you
so
were in and out?
They did their best, man. I mean, there was a period I was pretty much like often homeless, and then I would have bouts where they would kind of let me back in, but I would spend months on the street, and I was still in high school living on the street for periods of time. It was pretty gnarly. My mom ended up having a stroke from just the stress, because the way I was living, like it was very reasonable for her. She was just worried to get a call that I was dead. Like it was not even just the way that I was acting, like with the crime and stuff like that, but the way that I did drugs. I mean, I redlined it every opportunity that I could. Right. I was never like just catching a buzz. Like I was always just
hitting it
super hard. Right. And really going to some dark places. And somehow, I mean, I would manage to pull through, and through no credit of my own, I guess. Right. Just lucky. But yeah. So, my dad wasn't involved. My dad, I was pretty much dead to him. I think I was 15 or 16. My dad came in my room, and he looked at me like the scum of the earth. He used to like tell me that I think I'm John Gotti, and just but like in a real dismissive, like he was done with me tone. And I remember he came in my room once and smacked me in the face, and I beat him up pretty badly because I knew I could at that point. I wasn't scared of him anymore physically, and it was weird. I thought once I slayed that dragon, I would have some sense of relief, and it actually didn't. Actually, that's the day I really, like, my soul went cold. I think I really realized there was no chance of me having a relationship with my father at that point. I think somewhere every boy wants to have a father behind them, right? A champion behind them, and I think that's the day that any hope of that died, right? And so that's when I really just kind of flew into crime. They had me. I don't know what the exact legal term is, but where basically we went through a process where they removed any responsibility from me as dependent upon them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So they relieved him of that responsibility.
My mom and my dad. Yeah. And I don't blame them. They had 2 other kids in the house.
Okay. So you had 2 siblings.
Yeah, I had 2 siblings. And like, dude, people were coming by throwing fucking hammers through the window in the middle of the night.
Because of you.
Because of me. Yeah, I was out ripping. I would steal anything that wasn't nailed down. I would beat somebody up for like $5 or $500 or $5. I didn't care.
So you put your family in pretty good danger.
Put people in danger. Yeah. So I really left them without a choice, right? I mean, I guess you always have choice, right? But in that particular instance, I don't think I left them with too many other options. And they don't. Why would they want to be responsible for somebody that's completely unruly, right? Actually, my mom not too long ago sent me the paperwork, and it was like a list of like all the shit. It's like 3-page list of just arrested for this, and then he did this, and then it was pretty eye opening. Yeah. I remember this stuff almost like it's a movie that I've saw like a bunch of times. It actually doesn't really feel real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a big movie, but you can't remember every scene.
Yeah. And strangely enough, I remember quite a bit for somebody that was under the influence. I can only imagine what I've forgotten, but
oh man,
it's quite a lot. So anyway, it's an absolute disaster, right? So I'm just in so much pain, dude. I'm in so much pain. I'm, like 17, dropped out, like that's not what I wanted for myself. I always thought I had, deep down, I was thinking about this earlier. I wanted the traditional high school fucking Letterman jacket and the pretty girlfriend and to play a sport and, to do the things that everybody did. And it just didn't work out like that for me. I never felt okay enough with myself to even try that. It was just so much easier to take the pain that I was experiencing out on the world. And it's the only way I could live with the tools that I had was to just take that pain out on everybody. And that's all I was doing. I was just in so much pain. I felt so alone. And, drugs and alcohol were the only thing time I ever felt connected to people. And so I had to do it. If I didn't do that, I would have killed myself for sure.
Mm-hmm. Man. So in your early 20s, as you were going through the getting sober phase.
Yeah.
How old were you when you actually got fully
I got
sober?
sober when I was 23.
23? Okay. So coming out of that period, 17 to 20, you were in and out of the jail, psych wards, all these things. How did this then transition to the next step in your career? How did you get into MMA, bouncing, the stuff you got into?
So while I was in rehab, or the state home, group home type deal, I reached a re-entry phase where I could go jogging, and I would go on these long jogs, and I'm like 6 miles out, and I pass a judo school, and I'd always been interested in judo, and I go in, and there's a older gentleman there, older heavyset gentleman. He's an Olympic alternate, trained in Japan, really tough guy, and he invites me to come take a class. I take a class. I'm like, man, that's awesome. So I think I paid like $70 for the first month, and he never charged me again. I'd be at that judo studio 8 hours a day sometimes.
Oh, wow.
I had nothing else to do, right? Upon graduating the program, I would continue to go. For most of 20 to 23, I was sober. I would just relapse. I would hit these hard relapses, and they would really tear me up. But I just kept going to the judo school, whether I was fucked up or not. I just kept going.
Yeah.
And through there, I started to get exposed to other martial arts. I started going down to Brooklyn to train Greco-Roman wrestling with a coach who used to be a coach for the Soviet national team.
Wow.
And he had coached some Olympic champions for the Soviet Union, and very high level guy. And all the guys down there were really, really good. And so I started wrestling with those guys and getting exposed to underground fights in New York City, and did a couple of underground fights in New York City. And I recognized I wanted to fight MMA. I knew I wanted to do MMA since I saw the first UFC fight, 1993. I saw it on a cassette tape.
Okay. My
cousin brought it to a friend's house, and I watched that. I was like, man, that's so cool.
And how old were you at that time? Mid-teens?
1993, I was 12.
12, early. Okay. All right. So that helps put the pieces together of you getting into fights at that age, and when you actually saw that as a potential outlet or career for you.
Dude, even before I went completely sour, I remember I would like have my mom rent these fighting, they would have the VHS tapes at Blockbuster Video. And I would go and I would rent the same fucking videos over and over again.
Yeah,
and
I remember those days.
Them. And I was just enamored with these guys. I was dropped out, but I would go to school to go into the computer lab to look up whatever information I could find on martial arts. Yeah, dropped out, but I would go to school for that.
So you were nerding on martial arts from a young age.
Yeah. Going to libraries and like getting Black Belt magazine, because it's like you couldn't find this stuff everywhere. So I had to be like resourceful in how I was going to get this information. And I'm a junkie, so I'm resourceful. Like I can find what I need.
Okay, so that helps give that context from when you really discovered what MMA was as a kid, as you were getting into these street fights.
Yeah, so I always knew like I wanted to do something with this, right? And got offered to take my first professional fight in New Jersey, and eventually made my way out to Las Vegas. This whole time, I'm 10 months sober. I also get asked to start working in nightlife. Now, mind you, I'm a small guy at the time, like 5'6", 160 pounds, like not big, well trained, obviously. But so I get involved in nightlife, and that adds a whole different dimension and wrinkle to my life. So I have, and I'm really, even the fighting and the nightlife, it's all just furthering this character that I thought that I needed to be in order for people to love me, like me, or treat me well. Right. Everything was about building up this character. It all just seemed to it was all about promoting an image, right? Because I had no form of identity for myself. It was, I needed you to believe this story.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I had nothing else to offer.
And that first fight that you referred to in Jersey, was that with Frankie Edgar?
No, that was an underground fight, actually. That was not a professional fight. That was actually an underground fight. Yeah, it was not legally sanctioned in any way, shape, or form. There was no medical team there. There was no weigh-ins. You didn't even have to wear gloves if you didn't want to.
Yeah, that's on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Fight, I watched that last night.
Yeah.
Well, it looked like a wild environment in there.
Yeah, Frankie just got inducted to the Hall of Fame, so
that's incredible.
Congrats to him.
Wow. Yeah. What a story for you too. So.
Yeah, we see each other every now and then at like events and stuff if I'm coaching fighters, and complete gentleman, nothing but class.
Yeah.
So,
that's awesome. Okay. And so throughout this period of bouncing, getting involved in the nightlife, I can only imagine what that led to while you were doing it, right? As you were doing the fighting.
Yeah. So I'm starting my fight career.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a reputation because this is like, MMA it's still like no holds barred. It's not even MMA yet.
Yeah.
Right. So
early days, it was sketchy.
Early days. Right. And now women are paying attention to me for the first time in my life. Right. I'm sober. I'm not such a fucking menace anymore, at least in that regard. So again, just building my character more and more. And this is the mid 2000s, early mid 2000s. This was like apex time of juice head culture in the New York, New Jersey area and the club scene back then. So you're talking about some of the biggest mutants that you've ever seen in your life. And I'm this tiny guy just throwing these dudes around and having a good time. And, all my friends are these giants and yeah, we just felt invincible. And it was like a fraternity. The guys I bounced with, it was like a fraternity. We worked for a security company that basically put us at all the best spots in the Hamptons and we all worked with each other.
Oh,
and so
cool.
we knew everybody everywhere. And yeah, it was a weird time, man. It was just,
it wasn't just like one nightclub. You guys
we ran everything.
That's cool.
And
that I can see why you felt invincible for that.
Yeah.
Because you're probably around some pretty high profile people
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like this is like some of the clubs we worked at, we'd have like, what was her name? Like Jessica Simpson. Is that
wow.
Yeah. Mark Wahlberg, people like that would be coming in pretty often, Yeah. Like A-list celebrities and, some of them are a little bit more like underground house clubs, but all like really cool spots. And yeah, we had our run of the place and could literally do whatever we wanted.
Oh.
Yeah. So it just kind of kept furthering this thing. I wasn't happy during any of it. I'll say that. I wasn't happy during any of it.
Why?
Because I was a character. I wasn't myself, right? I'm literally trying to convince all these people that I am who I say I am the whole time.
Wow.
Can't be happy like that.
No.
Right? I think this happens for a lot of people, whether you come from a crazy upbringing or not. I think a lot of people in high school and early 20s to get an idea of who they need to be or who they want to be, right? And they start doing everything they can to become that, right? Maybe it's family pressure to be a certain way academically, professionally, right? You fall in, maybe you get involved in a certain trade and there's an idea of who you need to be to get ahead in that trade. And then I think in people's 30s and 40s, they start letting go of a lot of that stuff. I think the journey then is to like let go of a lot of the ideas of who you thought you had to be.
Yeah.
Right. And like just really just being who you are. It's like just kind of shedding a lot of armor and shedding a lot of costumes and masks. And I noticed that in other people and it's my experience. And I think that's a general sort of story arc that happens for a lot of people.
Right. Yeah. I was just going to ask if that was your experience and
it
sounds like it was. And so throughout your 20s, how long did you actually do professional fighting?
I fought professionally for 10 years.
Okay.
I retired while I was living in Phuket, Thailand. I lived in Thailand for 5 years.
Wow.
I moved out there to fight, ended up becoming the head coach of one of the more respected gyms out there, Phuket Top Team.
Yep.
And put together a great stable of fighters and traveled all over the world and did a lot of amazing things. And definitely, I was super talented as a fighter. My mental and emotional baggage did not allow me to reach my potential. But I saw that towards the end of my career. And so I was able to be a really effective coach and coached some really big names and won a couple world titles and with some fighters and did some cool things. And it was an amazing experience. And I thought that's where I was going to spend the rest of my life. I thought I'll be this coach and I'll coach fighters and try to make some money while I'm doing it. And that's really what I thought was going to be the rest of my life.
I feel like that transition from being a fighter throughout your career, bouncing all that stuff throughout your 20s to becoming a coach in Thailand was a massive catalyst for you to your transition of who you are today and what you work on today to help people.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's weird. I never in a million years would have thought I'm doing what I'm doing now for a living, but it all makes sense. Like it literally all makes sense. It's all I ever did. I followed these passions and interests and, self-development and getting sober. And, because man, if I don't do things to improve my situation, I suffer greatly. Like I'm not a person that could coast on not doing any work on myself. If I don't do any work on myself, I'm going to backslide into that, and I'm not doing this out of fear. Like, oh, I'm going to become that again. It's just, man, there's some dark tendencies and, deep inside. I'm much further away from them now, but now, and I'd say now I do this work. I choose to do this work because I like the freedom that comes along with it. Yeah. But for a long time, man, I had to do the work.
Yeah.
It was a choice, but it didn't really feel like a choice. It's like a choice with a gun to your head.
Yeah.
Right. Which doesn't really feel like a choice.
Can you just talk a little bit about that work specifically, personal development work to become more aware?
Yeah. So I feel like the 12 steps were the initial thing that I got involved in, and I got involved with a group of people that really took the 12 steps seriously. So not every 12-step meeting you go into takes the 12 steps seriously. Some of them are just glorified therapy sessions. People just go in there and they dump and complain. And if they get something out of that, great. I didn't get anything out of that. I would leave a meeting feeling worse if I did that. I needed to do the work, right? And so there's a process, the 12-step process. And some of the inventory processes where you start to analyze your resentments and your fears. And I had some really great mentors that helped me really learn how to dig into my resentments, my fears, my motives for things, and to really understand those at a deeper level than perhaps the average person might have access to if they're not forced to take a look at these things, right? So that was really helpful. I would read a lot of books, like a lot. I was always just reading like, Don Miguel Ruiz type books and Eckhart Tolle. And I would always just have my head in a book like that. I was always just very, very interested in the psyche and the spirit and just getting a deeper understanding. Once I moved back to America, I started in 2019, I started to experience PTSD symptoms for the first time in a long time.
Wow. So Thailand almost was like an escape in a way.
I had financial security and no worries. Everything was taken care of for me. And
simple, so much simpler life.
I left there, came back here, starting over, newly married, and figuring it out. And COVID all happens at the same time.
Wow.
So this just lack of safety in my own body. I felt like I had left an identity behind there. I'm not coaching a group of fighters that I was super excited about, and just didn't feel good about the road that the path that I was on with, and I was scared, and and I started writing a book about my memoirs. And so a lot of memories started to get chucked up.
Not in the right kind of way.
Well, I think in the necessary kind of way. Right.
Got it.
As I've moved on, I do my best to steer away from right and wrong, right? Because sometimes things are uncomfortable, but that might be necessary, right? That discomfort moved me to go deeper into my own work. And so I was really fortunate to have some friends that they paid for me to go to some leadership training and personal development stuff that they had been doing. And that really just blew my mind open. And I got addicted. I just started I was like this type of information, these trainings, it was really helping me reach deeper layers of myself. Right. And so as I started to experience freedom from the trainings that I was doing, I was like, man, I wanted to get trained in how to do this with other people. Right. And that's where I started to see the light come on for the opportunity to move into what I'm doing now and to start to guide people into their own clarity from their chaos, whatever that looks like.
Wow. Okay. So describe what that looks like today. What are you offering to people? I mean, you shared the journey just now of how you transitioned into that and why you gained that passion, how you actually gained the skills to be able to help other people, right?
Absolutely.
You had to do that work for yourself.
I had to do the work myself. It's an ongoing process. I stay in.
Doesn't stop.
It never stops.
Nope.
It's like there's always, and it's not like I need to heal so that I can do whatever. It's just I choose to examine where I'm not free, and I just continue to move towards freedom. So I generally work with men. I do work with women on occasion. Sometimes women just hit me up and they're like, hey, and if I like what they've, if I feel like I can work with them and I feel the energy is cool, I'll work with them. For men, there's so many dudes that get up and they don't feel like their life is theirs, right? Either they're uninspired, they don't have purpose, or the purpose that they're living out somebody else's purpose. They're in a job that they hate, right? So think about it. Like, you just left a corporate job. Why?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm looking for that freedom too.
Right.
That journey.
You were making decent money, I'm assuming, right? You have this nice place in PB. It's not cheap, right? The lifestyle's not cheap here. So you had to be doing okay financially, right? Somewhat. Okay. So what the fuck would let you give that up?
Well, I mean, the fulfillment and what I'm trading it for.
Boom. Right. Fulfillment. Okay. I don't give a fuck what a person does. Are you fulfilled?
Yeah.
Are you going to live a life that's fulfilled? If you're making millions of dollars a year and you don't have a relationship with your wife and kids, are you fulfilled? Right? Do you go home feeling good about yourself? That you're not fulfilling your entire, our duties as a man is to take care of those things, provide that safety emotionally,
right,
and physically, and have your presence felt by the people around you and making an impact other than just lining your own pockets. Right. So that happens, right? I got guys that multi-million dollar businesses, $30 million a year businesses. Man, I need some support, like finding some meaning in all this, because all this money and what?
It's not doing it for me.
It's not doing it, right? So that happens, but you don't need to be a multimillionaire. You could just be a guy that, man, I thought I checked all the boxes. I checked all the boxes they told me to check. And I'm not, I fucking feel disconnected from my marriage. Some guys, they're involved in their marriage and their wife bullies them. They don't have the relationships. They're so afraid to upset their wife, they won't speak up for themselves.
Oh, wow.
Right? So I can support them in that. The communication that it takes to one, be able to take up for yourself, create the room in your nervous system for you to do that, right? That doesn't happen by mistake. That's a learned behavior. That guy's got some sort of, psychological, emotional patterning probably from his upbringing, where it's better to just keep things on an even keel. Right. And so he's living a life that's not his, being bullied by his wife, she's just acting out her shit too. Right. Because she learned, I can't trust men. So I've got to fucking control this guy.
I see.
Right. So they got all this shit going on.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I can support them or that person into creating their own freedom, whether it means changing the dynamic of his relationship or leaving and getting a relationship that works for him.
Yeah.
Right. Then I'm happy to do that work with that person.
So philosophically, this is a great way of describing what you're doing to help and some examples within that. But how about more tangibly? What does an engagement with you look like from the starting point of initially connecting with you, and what type of cadence do they have with you with calls or coaching that you're doing, activities, whatever?
Absolutely. So my big thing for the past 2 years has been one-on-one coaching. I'm actually developing some group coaching stuff soon, so that will look a little bit different.
Okay.
But my one-on-one coaching is pretty in depth, right? So I work with people on 3-month agreements, because the depth of this work and for what it takes to really start to get a person in a different set of patterns
Takes time.
It takes time. Right. And so I'm not going to do sure. I could do a one-off call with anybody and give them some clarity and guidance. And if that's valuable to them, great. Like, I'm happy to do that. But if we're going to do transformative work, we need to agree that we're going to go on a process together.
Right.
Right. And so as we engage in that process, we'll meet on a 60 to 90 minute call once a week. Right.
Okay.
Geared towards, where are you? Where do you want to be? What tools are missing from you being where you want to be, right? What type of guidance does the person need? And we come up with a plan from there. And then I'm there to support them through that plan. So not just on our calls, but my clients, my one-on-one clients can reach out to me they've got a lot of, they can reach out to me. So I give them contact with me frequently, as much as needed, to support them in their goals. They pay for it, and I'm happy to do it. Like, this is not, imagine you have a coach that coaches you for a fight and does all the prep work with you and doesn't go to corner you.
Yeah.
Right.
It's weird.
Yeah. It's just, there's missing something. It's not that you can't be successful, but man, it'd be really helpful to have somebody in your corner, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So I can be that sort of source of strength, because I'm not going to get rattled by anything that you got going on. I've seen, I won't say I've seen it all, but I've seen a lot, and personally, and through the lens of other people, and emotionally, I can stay solid with people, and support them and into creating that own capacity for themselves, right? Because what I said at the beginning of this conversation, right, is like, what I had at home was a reactive man who couldn't do that. And my goal has always been to become the man that I wish I had around when I was a kid, and help other people become that too. Because look, my dad can never come back and parent me again, right? He's made the best amends he can and does the best that he can, and that's all he can do, right? He can't fix anything at this point, right? So it's my responsibility to be what I need, and to fill that role within myself, but man, what a beautiful purpose that gave me.
Yeah.
Right. So I could sit and be sad, and sometimes it is sad. Sometimes I was like, man, I wonder what it would be like to have that relationship with a father and an active guiding role in my life. I'm like, that would feel so foreign to me. But man, did it not give me a beautiful purpose to go out and reach people in the world? And, just sometimes people are just lost. Sometimes they don't know how to create a purpose. Sometimes they took the purpose their parents gave them, right? And they find out, man, this isn't what I wanted. And sometimes it's just their perspective is off.
Right.
And they're living in a perspective that's creating a world that feels like a prison. And so whatever it is, we can create clarity around what's actually going on, and what would be a path that would take you towards where you're trying to go.
What would you describe as the biggest challenge you've experienced on the entrepreneurial journey so far, particularly recently since you've started doing this? It could be a general or a specific answer.
So the first 2 years of this business, I just wung it, and it did really well, right?
That goes back to the idea of what everyone says, right? Just get started.
Just get started. I knew I'm fucking good at what I do, and nothing else mattered. And it's with that confidence, I got most of my business in the past couple of years without advertising. I got most of my business
word of mouth,
just being who I am, and fucking having a conversation with a guy on a jiu-jitsu mat. Turns out he owns a company and he needs some coaching on leadership.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
We go have a cup of coffee. I start working with him. We become good friends. I've got a couple of different clients that, they're my friends too, man. Like this. Don't mix business, but it's like, I fucking care about these people, and
this work requires that.
It's like I'm not a therapist, so you could take all those therapist rules and they can go fuck themselves with that part, right? I don't become best friends with everybody, right? But there are certain people, man, I become really good friends with these people. They've trusted me to go deep with them into some intimate places in their life and guide them. And so it's wild. Sometimes it's just the content that I put on Instagram reaches a certain person, or the person might know me and not really know what I'm about until they see my content, and that might warm them up to reaching out. Hey, I've got this problem. I'm not even sure if you can help me with this, and we just have a conversation, and it turns out that we can. So to answer your question, getting organized and moving into like as I'm developing this group coaching stuff, like that's required me to, I'm like, okay, at some point, maybe I should start paying attention to the marketing and all that stuff. And I don't know, I have marketing absolutely works, right? And I'm of the thought, man, marketing is important. And yet, look out, I've just continued to grow through relationships over the past couple of years. So it's sort of been this like, I'm open to using business tactics, right? There are formulas that people have that work, right? Do I want the lifestyle that comes along with being married to those formulas is the question that I've been asking myself lately, right? It's like,
Interesting.
do I have to follow the mold?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people in the coaching business that are slaves to their business, right? And it doesn't mean that what they have to teach isn't valuable.
Right.
But I have caught myself becoming a slave to my business at periods of time. And I'm like, that's exactly what I coach against.
Right.
Right. And so like, I'm not okay with being out of integrity in that way. So just,
wow. That's a thinker. Yeah. Becoming a slave to your business, even if it's your own.
Yeah.
Because you get this idea in your head of, and I imagine this is what you mean, for example, I need to be checking in on this, and that, this many times per day. I need to be posting this, and you just you over systemize it maybe. Is that?
Yeah. I think systems are important.
Sure. Overthink things, overanalyze.
Systems are important, but if you're too systemized that there's no room for humanity, I think that's a weakness, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a weakness. I think people are so fucking rushed all the time, and entrepreneurs amongst all people, they're so rushed about all the time. And it's like, dude, don't forget about the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Like, hey, listen, if you're balanced and fulfilled, right? And my relationships are, I'm keeping up with my relationships. Not that they're always fantastic and that there's not complications all the time, but I'm present to whatever's going on, right? The good, the bad, the ugly, right? And all my relationships, my family, the people close to me, my health is in check. Okay. Spiritually, mentally, I feel good. Well, let's tell the truth. Do you spiritually and mentally feel good, or are you stressed out all the time?
Yeah.
Could have kept your job if you wanted to do that. Right. So yeah, I love the freedom of being an entrepreneur. I love all that. I think it doesn't have to be the cookie cutter grind mentality. I think, some hard work is important. This whole hustle culture though, I think it's bullshit, man. I think it's just another way to keep people on a carrot and a stick, and it's not healthy. And it creates an endless comparison cycle for people. And I'm not into it, dude. I'm not doing it.
Man, I'm laughing because that exact statement has come up multiple times on this podcast. I think another guy literally said hustle culture is bullshit.
Yeah.
You guys are onto something.
Yeah. I think it's bullshit, dude. And I'm here to, if my mission is to create people that are present to their lives, well, getting stuck in the have to of hustle culture, that's not presence. That's a scarcity driven, future oriented living. That's not present. Right. So the name of the game for me is, how can I be present to all of the stuff that I have going on? I don't do it perfectly, but I'm awake to it enough to do it. Right. To put the work in, to do it more days, more and more days of getting that presence. It's like, you ever just like, you wake, it could be, I could get, whatever I need to done wrapped up for the day. And they'll be like, this need to do more. Need to do what? I live in San Diego. It's beautiful out. I'll go sit in my fucking hot tub if I want to and have a cup of coffee and enjoy my life.
I love
right?
It. Yep.
It's like, there's got to be balance. There's the idea of just suffering to suffer, or just to work hard, or to grind just to grind. For what?
Because you feel like you have to.
Because you feel like you have to, or you're not doing it right if you don't have to. Yeah, we have to work hard.
Yeah.
Like, I'm no stranger to hard work. I will work hard.
For sure.
I will work hard. I have a great capacity to endure suffering and discomfort.
Yep.
And also, I like to have a good time. And also, sometimes I'm just going to want to go walk by the beach and be still and be in my own energy. And sometimes, you know what? I want to lay with my wife in the morning, because I have this beautiful woman laying next to me, and I want to give her some time before I go rush off into the day and not forget about that.
Yeah. This all goes back to the core of what you started this podcast answering, which is this idea of incorporating this balance from all these different parts of life that all matter, and comparing that to the MMA idea of taking each different part of fighting into MMA. And you're bringing it back to that theme, which I think is so cool. And you're giving even more specific examples of that, whether it's laying in bed, giving your partner the time they deserve, or sitting in the hot tub or doing the hard work. Right?
Yeah, any system that goes out of balance for too long will show up with a dysfunction somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? Will end up in some dysfunction. And it's not like we can keep, a pie chart of 25% in these 4 quadrants at all times, right? But it's about, a rolling average.
Yeah.
Right? Is your rolling average fairly balanced? Are you tending to the things that are important? Right?
Yeah. Well said.
Is your life working for you or not? Right? And that,
Yeah.
that's it. I don't give a fuck what people do from a right and wrong sense. Like,
Yeah.
it's not, if you want to work your whole life and you've like nothing else and you're fulfilled by that,
Yep.
dude,
That's the key.
have a fucking blast,
Sure.
bro. Like, if that works for you, that works for you.
Yeah.
What I found more times than not, human beings require connection.
Yeah.
And connection is often the thing that gets thrown to the wayside when you're an entrepreneur. It's really, really fucking easy to throw connections out the window. And like, not just connections with others, but connections with yourself. Yeah. It's like, man, that shit is so important.
Yeah.
That shit is so important. Feel free to comment if you want to prove me wrong, but it's like, I don't know how you achieve fulfillment without those connections.
Yeah. Piggybacking off of that, there's a question I ask towards the end of each podcast. And the question is, what is an entrepreneurial life hack that you have in mind you could share with the audience that goes against the mainstream belief, something unique to you? It might be redundant because of all the stuff you just shared.
Sure.
But feel free to take from what you shared already or something else if you have it in mind.
So for me, and I've been really doubling down on this lately, I think it's really important to get connected with source. I don't give a fuck what your source is, right? For some of you people, it's Jesus. For me, that never worked, right? But I just connect with, I have a belief and a feeling and a connection to something greater. And I really like the idea of like tapping into that energy in the morning and like asking for guidance, right? If I have a limited perspective based off my very limited life, right? I've seen a lot, sure, but it's still fucking a drop in the bucket. Man, tapping into this infinite thing for some guidance, for some drive, for some inspiration before I move into the day. That my experience is that when I tap into that thing first, right? And just tap into that energy, get still. The inspiration that comes from that leads me to things that I find fulfilling. Right? So actually, I was, as all any entrepreneur that says they don't do this, I think is full of shit. But not too long ago, just laying in bed and just feeling like off on my purpose and kind of feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome, which can come from time to time.
Sure.
Right. And
seems like really happens to all of us.
And should I be doing this and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to spend some time with this in the morning. And so I just went down, sat and got present to like what's important, right? And just got present to the energy flowing inside my body and just asked for some guidance, right? And the guidance that came to me was really simple. It was weird. I opened up my Instagram feed and it was one of the videos that I initially shot when I first launched this business. And it was like, I just want to help men get stoked about their life. And it helped me really clarify and get simple on what I wanted to kind of get back to. It's like, sometimes I could take on such a responsibility for people. It's like, I got to make their lives perfect. Otherwise, like, I'm a fucking fraud, right? And it's like, that's just it's not fair.
It's
and
hard
it's
to
not
measure
true,
that.
Right? It's really hard to measure that, right? But what I can do is like, hey, I have a real good understanding of what it's like to create community for men, right? Men need fucking brotherhood, right? Women need sisterhood. If you're a they, them, you need fucking they, themhood, whatever your thing is, right? People need people, right? And we need that. And we need that on a regular basis to support us and lift us up and drive us towards the thing. And it's like, I'm here to create more of that first within a person's self and then getting them to go out and create that for their own life. Yeah. It's like, that's a simple mission, bro. It's a simple mission. It's an important mission, right? Guys that feel disconnected, guys that wake up and they're like, fuck, another day, and they're bummed about their life and they're dreading going to work or dreading dealing with their significant other or taking that extra minute to sit in the driveway before they go back into the house because they have kids and wife that they just feel completely, it's like, yeah, that's why I do this, right?
Yeah.
It's like, so those guys can get their lives back.
Yeah. What a great answer, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the next big goal for you? What are you working on right now?
Bringing group coaching in, right?
Okay.
So one-on-one coaching is not cheap, right? And I have no problem saying that. So,
and this is your way of scaling.
Yeah. And it's my way of I want to be able to reach. There's so many people out there that I can definitely add some value to their life. You know what I mean? And maybe I won't answer their call at 2:00 in the morning, but I can still add value to their life.
Yeah.
Right. And if I could and I want to do that, and it's exciting to do that. And it's like, dude, some people are at where they're at, and you just give some people that are hungry a crumb or just, a little bit of knowledge, and they're going to take that shit and run with it.
Yeah.
Right. And they're going to implement and put that into their life, and they're going to take these ideas and start building them. Right. And yeah, that's fucking awesome to me.
Yeah.
Right. And I love having these conversations. I'll have this conversation if the cameras are on or not. If you and I are just having a cup of coffee, we're going to have the same conversation. I'll have these. This is not a big deal for me to take time out of my day to come and do this. I look forward to these conversations, right? I'm in a good mood headed over here. I'm like, cool. I'm happy that I get to have these conversations. That's fucking awesome.
Yeah. I appreciate that about you, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, what a story! Tell us about your podcast. You have a new podcast.
Yes,
right?
I just hired somebody, so it's called No Nonsense.
No Nonsense. Okay.
Yes, with myself, and it's really going to be conversations like this. It's kind of tapping into the. I think one of my greatest gifts is the willingness to share openly about things that I don't know. Some people might. I don't really think of it like that, but just things that are maybe uncomfortable to share about. I'll share about parts of my process that are not the most flattering. Right. The demons, the struggles, and getting other people to talk about that in their own lives. What demons are you dealing with, and how are you overcoming them? That's the most fascinating thing in the world to me. I was having I have a friend that does body work for me, and she's pretty intuitive, and she does some coaching stuff too. And we're just having a conversation. I remember I asked her a question. She told me forthcomingly, she's like, oh man, sometimes when I'm talking, I feel like I need to give you the right answer. Right. And I was like, I just want you to give me the honest answer. I think that's the coolest thing possible. And we both laughed. Because that's what I want to hear. I want to hear the honesty. I want to hear the dark parts of the human struggle and the light parts. I just want to hear what's real for people. And I think because so much of my life was spent developing a character, right? Who are you aside from the character? Like, who are you aside from, whatever you push and portray on social media, right? I get it, dude. We're out there where, you're posting your highlights mostly. And of course that makes sense, right? Maybe you don't want to post that you had a fucking knockdown, drag them out argument with your significant other that day. And but you're fucking human. I want to see the humanity. And I think I think the humanity in anybody is interesting. Anybody, if you can really drag the humanity of somebody out and put it up front, I think that's fascinating to anybody. It doesn't matter who they are, right? If you get some big shot fucking CEO on here, and you will someday, right? You're going to have some super successful people on here, and they're going to be dropping knowledge bombs, and all that'll be really, really valuable. And they've probably talked about that a million times, right? What about their fucking humanity? What do you struggle with, right? Yeah. Where do you feel like a failure?
Who's the person behind that image?
Yeah. Tell me the real stuff, right? What do you have the most regret about? Right? Like that stuff is really interesting to me. And, also, dude, I like to have a good time too. I like to laugh at inappropriate things and tell wild fucking stories. And, I'm going to have my brother on as one of the first guests. My brother's visiting me right now.
Nice.
And, my brother's got some fucking crazy stories.
I can imagine the way you guys grew up.
Yeah. So it's like, and I'm also like, all that stuff's cool too, man. But again, it's the human part. Yeah. Right. And the incredible stories we have. Some of it is tragically hilarious. Some of it is just tragic. Some of it's sad. Some of it's, is a moment to be compassionate about. And some of it is, man, let's just have a laugh too. Right. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to tune into that, man.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, Eric, how can people find you online? What's your social media?
So Eric the Gentleman on Instagram is the easiest way to get in touch with me. I answer DMs. I usually check them at least once or twice a day. And I'll answer stuff in the request box too. Sometimes people just ask me genuine questions, and I'm not going to fucking charge somebody money for asking a question.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if they want further clarification, then yeah, we could talk about coaching and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm just happy to talk to people. It's like, I just wish there was like, I don't know. I'm a fucking middle-aged guy now. We didn't have this shit when I was a kid.
Yeah.
People that we could ask questions to, and such, intimate contact with people that had stuff going on that we thought was cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's cool. You know what I mean? And I like having conversations with people.
Yeah. Well, Eric, man, what an amazing story and conversation. And thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all this stuff.
Oh, I appreciate it, brother. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, brother.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers.
Thanks, man. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Nichols and Dimes Show. Please hit the subscribe button on YouTube and follow my Instagram page at Nichols and Dimes. The podcast Instagram page is at Nichols and Dimes Show. And please like any of the videos you come across on either platform and leave a comment, leave feedback. It helps me to improve and innovate and to continue to scale and bring more interesting guests to the Nichols and Dimes Show. Thank you all for the support, and we'll see you next time.